One thing I find myself struggling with is letting how others treat me affect my self-esteem. I want to get to the point where I can detach my sense of self-worth from my physical appearance, performance with my career, how people treat me or value me, and more. I just want to exist and be happily myself. I'm an extremely self-aware person and intentional person. But for example, if someone treats me negatively, I internalize it and think it's because I'm not good enough for whatever reason, i.e., personality, looks, etc. Even though I feel as my intentions and actions were kind and pure with the person who I feel has treated me negatively. Do you have anything to share on this topic for a future video? This was a comment from Caleb.B.T, and I thought I would address this because this is I think self-esteem, this is, and I've written some things down, so bear with me. I express myself the best actually in writing, which makes creating these YouTube channels a little bit challenging for someone who is so inclined as myself. But if you have been with me for a while, you'll know that that's precisely why I put myself on YouTube, is because it makes me so uncomfortable and it's a challenge. So therefore, I thought this is a good practice ground for me to face doing something that's uncomfortable. So it's building my distress tolerance. For me, the biggest tool, the most useful tool that I have found in helping me cultivate and develop my deep sense of self, which includes my self-esteem and my confidence, is my meditation practice. Why? Because we are a society, especially nowadays, currently, we are a society who our energy is being fragmented and dispersed in all directions outside of us, outside of the self. So we are listening to the influences of other people. There's all this noise externally. And what that does is, if you don't, for instance, have a dedicated meditation practice, you are never with yourself in silence and stillness. You are never checking in on yourself and visiting that internal space that we all have. And that guiding compass is being muted and perhaps laying dormant. So what meditation practice does, and why I'm so passionate about it, not only because I'm a practitioner and a teacher of it, but I am a firm believer in the power of meditation to change a life. It has changed mine, and it's changed countless people's that I've witnessed. But the basic crux of meditation is that we turn our attention inward. And the easiest way to do this, of course, is to focus on the breath, because that's the one thing that we can, if we are alive and breathing, that is, if we are privileged enough to be alive, we have our breath reliably. So the yogis figured this out thousands of years ago, that you can focus on the breath and only that. And then what happens is all the storytelling and all the personal narratives, the ego, the egoic mind, the desires of the ego, all of these things start to come to the surface. And what is taught in yoga is to simply notice it, to witness those thoughts, witness everything that's coming up without judgment, and just allowing it to be there and noticing it silently and being curious about it, but not critical of it necessarily. So what that trains you to do is to understand and acknowledge the ego. Why is this important? This is the key to life, in my opinion, because once you recognize and acknowledge your ego, and you can say, "Hi, ego, I see you," and you just become this seasoned, silent witness of your thoughts. You're the one that's, witnessing yourself, the ego having the thought. So you are in possession of it, but you are not identifying with it. That is actually the key, because the difference is, and this is, I'm going somewhere with this, is that self-esteem is, of course, self-generated. It's our sense of self-worth, and that is different from ego. So ego is having the opinions or the judgments outside of yourself from external sources like your parents, society, your spouse, all of these things. It's judgment from external sources dictating or determining your value as a person, while self-confidence or self-esteem is that internal judgment is the determinant factor of your value. Confidence is built through repeated actions that align with your core set of values: truth-telling, honesty, integrity, having our actions aligned with our beliefs, having what we say we are going to do match what we actually do, having personal integrity. But if you create the evidence that serves as undeniable proof that you are who you say you are, we call this living with authenticity, then you will have actually no issue with confidence, and external factors such as what people say about you, criticism, hatred, jealousy, all of these things that are projected onto you. It might sting momentarily, but you're going to be far more resilient to those factors, and you will be more in a state of equanimity, and you will be able to be walking through life, carrying your own compass within you to guide you, and that you will feel that security. I'm speaking from experience. I have been cultivating this over decades, and as I've come to my adulthood now, in my 40s, I look around me and it's very evident that not many people care to do this internal work. They don't. In fact, a lot of people that I teach meditation to, their number one obstacle that they express to me that is preventing them from practicing meditation, even if they are curious or desiring to have a practice of meditation, their number one obstacle, can you guess? What's stopping them is their fear of what they will feel when they start to go inward. And that is because we, again, societally, unless you grew up with yoga and meditation in your household from a young age, in which case consider yourself extraordinarily blessed and privileged. I didn't learn this until I was like 20. So, early enough, but I wish I had known this when I was 15, 16. I wish I had known all of this. These are life, self-management tools that are not taught in schools. It's so ironic that we don't teach how to manage the self, the body, the mind. We don't teach these things, at least not in the US. It's still kind of on the fringe. But anyway, I forgot where my train of thought was. I remember now, many people who approach me wanting to learn meditation, their number one obstacle that's stopping them is that they are scared to sit in silence with their own consciousness, with their own thoughts. So it comes down to that because they have been suppressing that for so long. They have been not being introspective, not practicing inward attention and focus. The focus, like I said, is always projected outside of us, outside of our bodies, outside of the mind, which is one unit, really. We are just a bundle of living consciousness. So they don't have any experience being with themselves, really. So this is why it's such a valuable, this is one of the reasons why meditation is such a valuable or invaluable, really, tool to have in your toolkit, because it can be applied. It can help you manage so many things: stress, external stress, internal stress. It just is a critical component to a healthy lifestyle. So the first question, I think, would be if you are wanting to cultivate your self-esteem so that the external praises, and by the way, this goes in both directions. I'm not just talking about external criticism, like if you receive criticism at work and then you internalize that, like, oh, I must be crappy at my job or whatever. It also goes for external praise, like, oh, you did this and this, you're a superstar. And both of those are tied to the ego. So nothing is wrong with that, enjoying praise, and nothing is wrong with feeling temporarily bad when you receive criticism. However, we don't want to dwell in that space, and we want our recovery time to be quicker. So we don't want to give too much power to external praise, nor do we want to give too much power to negative criticism. And that's where that state of equanimity that the yogis figured out, that's what we can practice and cultivate if that's not inherent in your personal nature. This is a practice that you can do. So when you meditate, you can ask yourself the question, who am I? Just ask yourself, who am I? And see what thoughts arise. There's going to be a narrative that comes up when you ask yourself that. And then there's going to be a story that your thoughts, all these conceptual ideas, your identities, labels, all of these things that are the egoic mind, that's all going to come up. And what we practice is noticing those thoughts, letting those thoughts arise and exist without judgment of them. So the practice is just silently, with no mind, paid to it, letting it come, letting it be there, and noticing it simply. That's it. That's what meditation actually is. So notice where the mind goes. And for the first few times that you meditate, if you've never done this before, you will probably hate the process, the practice. You will probably hate it with a passion, because usually what comes up is a lot of negative, suppressed feelings, a lot of regrets about the past, perhaps, or anxieties about the projected future of things. And you hear me say all the time that we suffer the most in our imagination. We suffer with anxiety over future events that have not happened yet, what ifs. And we also suffer greatly with rethinking or ruminating on past events with either regret or sadness or, again, these negative emotions. So the suffering is both in the past and the future. The peace, the bliss, is in the present moment with your breath. That's it. We recognize when we meditate the bliss that is just being alive with our breath, and how sweet that inhalation and exhalation, how glorious that is. And a lot of people aren't even conscious of any of their breaths throughout the day. It's an automatic thing that our body does, thank God, but we are not conscious of our breath. And that too is just bringing awareness to the breath through meditation practice. That's a gift that you can give yourself, because you will carry that in every activity that you do. You will carry yourself differently if you have this internal practice of checking in with yourself and cultivating that internal guiding compass. We all have an ego, and the key and the goal here is not to kill the ego. The ego is critical to our survival. We need that narcissistic quality in us, that self-serving ego. We need that because it keeps us alive. It helps us survive in life. However, when the ego is overblown and it's too much in control, that is a sign of low self-value. So that's just something to be aware of, that somebody with an overblown ego, that is a red flag, if you will, or a key component of very low self-esteem or low self-worth, meaning that person feels very poorly about themselves, perhaps even to the point of self-loathing. And I won't name any names, but I'm thinking of a few people in the public eye who meet that criteria. But anyway, we all know someone in our lives who meets that criteria. That's why that saying, we want to keep our ego in check. We want a healthy balance of acknowledgement of the ego without serving the ego in our behavior and our interactions with others. I know this is going to sound very simplistic, but I don't mean to sound flippant. Self-esteem really just comes down to repeated acts, repeated esteemable acts that build that stack of undeniable proof or evidence that you are who you say you are. You tell the truth in your interactions with others. You don't lie to yourself. That goes with hand in hand with telling the truth. Of course, it begins with ourself. If we're self-deceptive, look at the parts of your life where you are lying to yourself first and foremost, and then rectify those, but then practice telling the truth in public, in life in general. Your life will become much easier and simpler when you just tell the truth. That's what I rely on. And since you asked me, that's the advice that I can offer you. If you recognize that you are allowing the external expectations of other people dictate how much you value yourself or that make your self-worth, this is something that you can cultivate over time. But I do think that you have to be, first of all, you have to have the self-awareness that that's you. And then you also have to have the willingness to turn your attention inward and do that introspective work and revisit that. It's not enough to just do that once. You have to revisit that space, uncomfortable as it may be. And I would say the more discomfort you feel when you visit that space is probably an indication of your need to do just that. So I wish you the best of luck, and I thank you for your comment. Please leave comments down below as always. And I thank you very much for watching and for being here, and you shall see me soon.